Today we're making some fake landscape boulders to cover up some utility meters. Connecting the container house to utilities resulted in a few unsightly meters that were left hanging out, so I decided to make a big fake boulder that matched the surrounding landscape to cover them. This is a really easy one-day project that starts with some 3/4 inch plywood. Now I knew how big the utility meters that I wanted to cover were, so I just sketched a rough boulder shape that would be big enough to hide them. I drew some plywood ribs that were about 2.5 inches wide and then used my jigsaw to cut them out. Now I want the contours to be fairly gradual, so I then traced the existing set of ribs and then drew a parallel line just about an inch inside. This will give me different sets of ribs that slowly graduate in size. To connect the pieces of plywood, I'm just going to use some scrap cutoffs from 2x3s and 2x4s and screw them right to the plywood. Some of them I screwed on flat, and then the other ones I used the width to define the spacing. And all I'm trying to do is just create a semi-organic shape that's securely fastened together. The thicker you make the plywood ribs, the more overlap you have between them, which makes it easier to fasten. But 2.5 to 4 inch wide ribs work well for a boulder this size. Next up, I'm going to apply a layer of steel mesh over the plywood shape. I'm just going to cut this with my tin snips and then staple it on. The mesh is flexible, but it's not quite like a fabric, and so I used the tin snips to cut into it a little bit, which helped me get the contours a little bit tighter. I flipped it upside down and kept folding these flaps over and adding more staples. And then I just trimmed the mesh to match the bottom of the boulder. As I was moving it around, I noticed that some of the staples were coming loose, so I decided to add in some pan head screws 3/4 of an inch long. With the screws, I'm really able to pull the mesh tight to the plywood and get a really nice contoured look, and so I just kept cutting in with the tin snips and adding additional screws. Now the tin snips work great, but can be a little bit tedious, so I tried out my new RYOBI rotary cutoff tool, and that sheared right through the mesh super fast. Now the tighter curves can be a little bit tricky, so I just used a hammer to really pound the mesh into the plywood. To cover the boulder, I'm going to use 150-pound bag of Quikwall Surface Bonding Cement. This is a really strong concrete product. It's reinforced with glass fibers and is super easy to use. You just add water, mix it with a hoe, and then you can apply it right to the mesh with your hands. But be sure to wear gloves when you do so. I would just grab a couple handfuls at a time and just slowly push it into the mesh. Now I don't want to push too hard so that it all falls through the mesh, just enough to get a good adhesion to the steel and really blend out the curves of the rock. This was really easy to do. It only took about 20 minutes and it felt a lot like doing paper mache. Now, the Quikwall product that I got was white, and I wanted to add a little bit of an orange-brown color to it so it would better blend in with the Joshua Tree landscape. So I mixed in some liquid coloring, also from QUIKRETE, to give the water sort of a buff color that I then added to the dry Quikwall to make an earth-colored top coat. I added this layer right over the white layer, and the total thickness of the Quikwall was just about 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch. Now, this rock definitely didn't look very natural so far, so I got some sand and dirt from that area and then went full Salt Bay and sprinkled it all over the still moist plaster. Most of the glass fibers got pushed underneath the surface of the plaster, but a few of them stuck out, so you can just remove these either with a lighter or with a razor blade. The boulder only weighs about 60 pounds, but there was some wire sticking out from the bottom, so it's a good idea to handle it with gloves. We used this boulder to cover up some random utility meters that were left over from the container house. These are important pieces of equipment, but we don't need to access them often, so we thought covering them up would just keep them a little more safe and make the landscape look a little more tidy. To be honest, I really didn't expect it to work this well. I really just wanted a decent cover for this equipment, but it actually blends in with the landscape pretty good. So I think I might build a taller one to go around this taller piece of equipment. I'm also starting to think of other ways to use this Quikwall plaster, and the idea that's coming to mind is a climbing wall that looks like it's real rock. But let me know your ideas in the comment section below. If you want to know more about the concrete products that I use, go to QUIKRETE RYOBI.com. Check out some of our other videos and don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thanks. Bye.